Hello, and welcome to Coding with Steve. I am Steve, and this is Small Plates. So we have some code here, and our goal is to quickly simplify it. So let's go through what this is doing. It's a basic console app. That's what this main function is. And it's got a few things going on. Firstly, it gets the result of with items, and we pass log items into with items. Log items basically gets the list from the enumerable that it's passed, from here, which is items, and then with each of those items, it goes through log item, and log item essentially console.writelines that item. And that comes from this enumerable, which is first, second, third. So then we console.writeline the result, which from down here is complete. And then we read key so that our command window does not disappear once it's finished. So when we run this, we basically see first, second, third complete, and that's what we want to see. So as we go through this code quickly, the first thing you'll see here is the delegate string do with items, or the delegate that returns a string do with items. The point as we go through this is to have a little bit deeper of an understanding of where things came from. So as we're using modern language features, we have a deeper understanding of what the language is doing for us. So when the compiler sees the delegate keyword, it basically creates a new internal class that looks like this. It's a internal class do with items, and it extends the system.multicast delegate class, and it has a public function called do with items. That's the constructor, and it takes an object, which will be, when we use it, our program static, and int pointer that points to a method, and then it also has a public virtual method that returns a string, in this case called invoke, and that takes an IEnumerable of string for its value. And it also creates a couple of other things that have to do with the .NET Framework's asynchronous programming model, but that model is now considered obsolete because of tasks. So when a method invokes a delegate, like we see down here in with items, it's literally calling this invoke function, or this invoke method that's on that automatically generated delegate class that it creates. So the next thing that's happening is that our main method gets called. First we saw this delegate, and now we come down into our program and the main method gets called. For that, we get the result of with items. And to with items, we pass our log items static method. Notice that with items expects a do with items delegate, but log items itself is not of type do with items. It's not that type of delegate. So basically, if you think about what the compiler is doing, this is syntactic sugar that gets compiled down to the creation of a generated do with items delegate object and calling its invoke method down here. That calls into this log items method, and if we look into log items, it basically just two lists on the given items that it's passed down on that enumerable. This is good practice basically when you're using enumerables so that you're sure not to doubly enumerate something, but it also gives us access to this for each extension method, which we're using here to show that link style methods themselves use delegates to handle their inner workings. For each isn't on the enumerable because it's not a link method. I just wanted to use this as an example. So coming back up to the main function, we have a console write line that logs the result from line 27, which we know is complete, and then we have that read key again, which is just to keep our console from disappearing when we're done. So as we move toward the more modern language features, the first thing I would probably do is get rid of this do with items delegate, because really we no longer need it. The C# language designers, after introducing this feature and generics, realized that we don't really need special delegates. We only need two basic ones. So, and those basic ones are funcs that have a return type, and actions that don't return a type but take in generic parameters. Funcs also will take in generic parameters, but the final generic parameter is always its return type. And actions can take up to 16 generic parameters. Funcs can take up to 15 generic parameters and a 16th one, which is the return type. Well, let's not duplicate that there. So that being the case, and knowing what those do basically, now we know that we can replace do with items. Because it has a return type, we need a func that takes an IEnumerable of string and returns a string. An IEnumerable of string and returns a string. Yep. And now that allows us to completely get rid of our do with items method because we no longer use it. So that all can completely go away, which is great. Basically, like we said, these can take up to 16 parameters. If you need more, you'll have to create your own, but might I suggest you do some refactoring if you need more. So now that our do with items is a func, we can do the next thing we want to do, which is actually to take these two static methods and turn those into lambdas, because we don't really need all this boilerplate for this. The compiler can do that for us. So the first one we're going to get rid of is this log item method. And to do that, we'll just do this and take each item and say console.writeLine, write line with that item. And that allows us to completely get rid of this. It's just a one-line lambda. And realistically, now that the compiler knows we're just doing this console.writeLine with it, we can just convert that into a for each with console.writeLine as its delegate. We don't need that other log item lambda or the function at all, or the method at all, I mean. The next thing we want to look at, of course, is this log items method itself. So for that, we'll just create this here. We'll say given items, and with those, we want to wrap it in curly braces because we need multiple lines. And we'll say with given items, we're going to toList it, and on the toList, we're going to for each with console.writeLine. And then we're going to return this string complete, and that allows us to completely get rid of this log items method. Now, as we look at this, this clarifies that what we're really doing here is just logging each item in our items list and then returning complete to log that. So what we can do even further is take items and say toList on that, and then for each console.writeLine. We don't need that method call, and we can delete this, and in our next write line just log complete, and that allows us to get rid of this with items method altogether. So once we delete this commentary, we've gone basically from 35 lines of code down to 19 lines of code, or really 18 lines of code, which is pretty cool. But more importantly, what we've done is removed a couple of levels of indirection, and we've obfuscated some of that abstraction away. What I mean by that is now when you read the code, all you have to think about is the function of it. There's no reason to have to think about a bunch of meta characteristics just for us to process the real meaning and business logic we're dealing with in this code. And that's pretty great. I don't know how. Well, I'm not sure how, but there might be some refactoring we could do on this, but this is enough for now. So what we went over was what a delegate actually is, what the compiler creates when you use a delegate. And we've gone over that you don't actually need custom delegates anymore because of funcs and actions. We've also gone from using predefined static functions, and those could be static or those could be not static, but gone from using predefined functions to pass as delegates. And we went to using lambdas, and then we went even further and said we actually don't need any of the lambdas we were using because really we just want a to-list on that items, write the lines down, and then write complete, and then read key. So if we run this again, we'll see that it's actually doing exactly what it did at first with much less code, and it's much easier to understand. And I think that's pretty great. If you found this video helpful, leave a like down below. And if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, leave those in the comments section. Other than that, thanks, and we'll see you for another small plate another time.